Hello, welcome to our conversation about communities in the time of COVID. I really want to open with the question, what place, one could ask, does the church really occupy in 21st century communities in the UK? Well, after all of the work that we've been doing, it turns out that's a very central one. Physical churches may have been closed, but you've been busy. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, we certainly have, Fran. We've been extremely busy. I'm very aware that for many people, church might seem very much on the edge of our society. But one of the things, if you look globally, is that the majority of people across the world, it's certainly the case in London, where something like 2/3 of the population describe themselves as religious. So religious beliefs and views in a global perspective have a massive impact on the way people live and respond to various situations. And part of the DNA, if you like, of the Church of England is that we're there to serve and engage with the whole community. The other big thing that's been happening is that our churches have been working particularly with local authorities, other local charities, to try to set up support networks.
What we started seeing is that this has been a continuity in the history of the church and the function it performs in society. One of the biggest commonalities that has struck us was the similarity to the church and the function it performed in the cholera crisis in the 19th century. Different people who worked for it, who preached scientific information almost to communities, thus really turned around the response to the cholera crisis. Do you think there are these commonalities and continuities, and what do you think we can learn from them now?
I certainly think there are some commonalities, and certainly in my own work today, I've valued greatly some of the input about some of the narratives that help us to understand the COVID pandemic and how they play out. So going to the 19th century context, that was certainly an era where undoubtedly many more people were connected with the Christian church, but a great many also weren't. I think one of the really interesting things that was going on in the 19th century, which Charles Kingsley's cholera sermons, which I know you've looked at very closely, spoke into, was how do we understand what's going on around us, both in terms of any religious beliefs or big world views that we might have, and how do we make sure that those narratives are also scientifically really well informed. So one of the challenges for me now is, what's the 21st century equivalent of how do we communicate well into our world?
But you've mentioned our collaboration in particular, which brings together church leaders with scientific researchers, sociologists, and so on and so forth. And I was wondering whether there's something you can tell us about what has been really fruitful for you personally about our collaboration, especially during the COVID-19 crisis.
In the early days of the pandemic, it was probably true that certainly in the church, as in most organizations, there was a huge challenge of what on earth do we do now? You know, it was crisis management, essentially.
Yeah.
The deeper questions of how do we understand what's going on in our midst? What are the deep theological narratives, the religious narratives, the scientific narratives that are playing into how we understand what's going on? Because the better our understanding is, the more it helps to shape our response. Certainly found through our work in equipping Christian leadership in an age of science, we have been able to explore some of those deeper narratives. And so it's been a huge gift to have the situation where you've been able to present some of your work on narratives to some of our bishops in the Church of England. People really are asking these deep questions about meaning and purpose. And it's really important having this deep level work that can give a really good context for those conversations to take place.